Hi, Ann.
How are you?
Good. It's nice to see you again, or hear you again anyway.
Oh, don't let them know we can't see each other. The illusion is so fabulous, isn't it, that we're actually able to see each other? Well, I'm here in Madison, Wisconsin, and it's a beautiful June day, but yesterday we had all these severe storm warnings, and they were predicting hail the size of baseballs. And I was so afraid of the hail the size of baseballs that I went and hung out at the Sundance 680, which is our sort of yuppie, glamorous Sundance theater here. Where, it has like a cafe and a bistro and a theater, and I spent like hours and hours there moving from one compartment to the other.
I know, I read your post.
I saw kind of a cool movie called Paris Je t'aime, Paris I Love You. It was like 18 little films. Mm-hmm. It was kind of cool. I recommend that if it's in your area. And I don't recommend hail the size of baseball. But anyway, I went on and on and on, and I kept waiting for the hail to get done so I could go home. It never hailed. It didn't hail even the size of, BBs.
Well, hail.
So hail to the lack of hail or whatever. So, did I say that I'm Ann Althouse and you're Annie Gottlieb?
Yeah, I'm not sure you did, but I think people know that by now, right?
Well, but I think it's important to say because some people listen on the podcast and they don't see us, and they,
As you can see, if you can see me,
yeah.
I decided to dress ever so slightly in honor of your breast power post.
Oh, damn it! I could turn this top around and it's low cut in the other direction, but I don't want to turn it around on camera.
Well, then we would be not only the same size, but perhaps the same depth.
Are you showing cleavage?
Well, you'd think so, but in reality, I will give it away. It's my pecs, actually.
Oh, because you're a black belt in karate, aren't you?
Further down, unfortunately.
You could beat people up big time, right?
Right.
You're a black belt in karate. Have you ever killed anybody?
Not yet. Not yet.
Get on that. Well, because you know that amongst women, it's all a big competition to see who has the biggest breasts and who can, out-glamorize the other one. I'm wearing my jewels. I'm wearing my tiara.
I can't because the hole in one of my ears has closed up. As I said to someone, I shocked a male friend of mine once by saying, if you don't keep a stud in the hole, after a while you can't even find it anymore.
That's right. Oh, you mean that was a dirty joke? Oh, well, you're nasty. You made a dirty joke last time that I only understood after I was re-listening to it.
I remember saying it was too subtle.
It was too subtle, and I was like, because you're always thinking of segueing to the next subject, so you don't necessarily say, okay, well, I don't have time to think about that, but I did get it on, I got it on the replay. That was dirty. Annie.
So I'm showing my sort of pseudo-cleavage.
Oh, damn it. I have this tank top, which has like a high front and it's like reversible, so you can decide if you want to go high or low. But I went high. I mean, I could go off camera for a minute and reverse it and go low.
So you're the demure one today.
Yeah, I'm really being demure. But I am showing some summertime shoulder flesh. And I have a new haircut, so you'll see I have this new look here.
Well, I need one of those.
Yeah.
I'll have what she's having. I definitely need.
So anyway, all of this small talk, I feel like we must talk about immigration a little because it was a big thing with the immigration.
You've avoided it long enough. You've only posted on it to say that you don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, when I originally read about it, silly me, I thought, oh, isn't this good? There's a bipartisan solution, and Bush has already agreed to sign it, so all right. Now, problem solved. It's a complex problem. They hammered it out. They've got the proposal. All right, let's move on. Now that won't be an issue in the presidential campaign. That was my whole idea, that it would, but apparently not.
And apparently it never was even intended to be that. I mean, Mickey Kaus thinks that it was so nibbled to death by amendments that neither side really wanted it anymore, but they all wanted some cover.
But don't you think that they wanted it when they originally proposed? You don't think the whole thing was a fake, do you?
Well, I think the centrist senators wanted it. People like Graham and McCain really wanted it, and I think they make a lot of sense,
I mean, they must have thought it was going to work, because I can't believe that McCain would have staked so much on the outcome if it was some kind of sham.
The passions on this issue are absolutely raging, and they're almost incomprehensible to me. But then I'm a big city kid who's used to a lot of diversity. And I understand that. I actually have a friend here in North Carolina who is very offended by the fact that the state is almost like being in Quebec, because everything's in 2 languages. Mm-hmm. There's a huge immigrant Mexican population here. Huge, which is really extraordinary.
I don't see how you can do bilingualism when there are other languages too. I mean,
right, but everything, every package you buy, every set of instructions that you open, you know, from Walmart about how to screw together the lamp, is in English and Spanish, everything. And I have a friend who's from an old North Carolina family, and she's extremely offended by this. When she goes into a cafe and she sees a family sitting there, a Mexican family talking Spanish, she is really offended, and she feels as if the America and the South of her youth has been destroyed and is being taken away from her.
So this is
you can say, you know, on the other hand, I have a friend, a childhood friend from Chicago, who, when I reconnected with him through the internet as an adult, said to me, we were wetbacks, you know. And theirs was the American dream. I mean, they were desperately poor and had to keep their heads down in Chicago because they were illegal. And he's a fabulous guy. So I have heard both sides of this issue, and I'm, in my usual ambivalent way, torn between understanding them both. I mean, I realize that change is inevitable, but the people who are resisting it are right about something. I mean, there's some aspect of American identity that can't be totally washed away.
Well, you seem...
And I think it's cultural, not racial, but...
So you're not suggesting that the people sort of have, like, dark feelings that they should be ashamed of, where they're anti...
Well, I think the passions... I think there's a racist and nativist streak to the passions, a feeling that we're being taken over by the other and we're completely losing our traditional identity. And to me, that the racial and the cultural are mixed together in a way that needs to be separated. I mean, I think that people of all kinds of origins are what make America interesting and make it the future and make it the world in miniature, but that there has to be something we have in common, and maybe it's the English language. Although I also believe that Americans ought to learn another language as a matter of course in school.
Yeah. Maybe it would be
Not
good to have more than 2
them...
languages. Maybe what people are afraid of is bilingualism, but if it was just multilingualism, it wouldn't be as disturbing.
Well, it has to be some language. It doesn't have to be Spanish. I mean, you know, Spanish could be the default just because it's the other language of the hemisphere.
I think there are a lot of schools where the only foreign language they teach kids is Spanish, that you don't get a choice anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I know that we used to be able to take French, German, and even Russian in some places. Well, and it would make sense to be able to take Arabic and Japanese.
In my town, you can take a lot of languages. I don't know what all the ones offered in the high school are, but there are a lot. So, But
I think they do have a point. But I think that the racial and the cultural get confused, and that you know that when race and culture are separated, it turns out to be culture that people are upset by. Which is why white people can accept Barack Obama when he talks like a white person, or like when he sort of talks generic, non-black English. He's very unthreatening to white people. So it's really not race. It really is culture and language.
Do you think it would be helpful for Barack Obama to get to be president, so it would kind of help people work through some feelings about race, and it would have a healthy effect on the national psychology in some way?
I kind of think that's already, that just even his getting as far as he has as a candidate has sort of served that purpose. I mean, I think we're a lot further along towards that than, the last remaining issue is the cultural one, because if you hear Obama talk to black people, the way he talked to a union, he actually has a speech posted on his website, which I'll find the link to, where he's talking to a black group, and he sounds like a Southern black preacher.
Well, don't they all kind of shift around and have different voices? Like there's certain situations in which Bush drops his G's, and Hillary Clinton has this...
It's another version of the same thing, no question.
It's sort of like dressing different ways. I think we do speak different ways to different people.
And this is a skill, actually, for living in the present. You almost have to be able to do that.
At some point, it's pandering, and it sounds phony, and we should be able to mock it. But I wouldn't be too eager to do that too quickly, I think.
Well, it's a skill that we all use, I think. At least all of those of us who are comfortable leaving our own, whatever our own group of origin is.
But the trick is to come across as genuine, You could be the same all the time and seem like a phony, or you could change a lot and do it in a way that is smooth and believable.
Yeah, and one of the ways to do that is to joke about yourself doing it. Because, like, when I'm with people who have Southern accents, I start to talk with a Southern accent. I'm just a parrot, It goes in through my ears and comes out my mouth, and I don't even necessarily intend it. It's sort of social chameleon.
Yeah.
But it's a little starker when you look at it across the black-white cultural divide, and you realize that it's the irony of it is that isn't even Obama's original way of speaking. He picked that up in Chicago. You know, he grew up in Hawaii with his white grandparents, so he had to learn to talk that way, which is really interesting.
Yeah, well, you know, with people who are in minority groups, they might have one way to speak so that they'll be accepted by a group that they're afraid is going to discriminate against them, and then they have a way that they speak among, you know, friends in the neighborhood or whatever. And I don't think we should be too hard on people who have developed different ways of speaking because they've had, you know, disadvantages. But as you say, I don't think Barack Obama necessarily had any of those disadvantages.
It's just interesting. You know, I don't mean to criticize him for it. I actually think that black people are probably fine with it because they all know how to do it. But, or most of them. And, you know, I just wonder whether some of the white people who find him so unthreatening would find him as unthreatening if they heard him talking, you know, like Jesse Jackson.
Yeah, but so do you think his enemies are going to use that against him to draw out a kind of a racist reaction in people or something like that?
His enemies are going to use everything they can get their hands on.
But not the things that will hurt them more than it helps them. I mean, certain types of attacks backfire, obviously.
And then there's the question, with whom? With whom is it going to hurt you? With whom is it going to help you? I mean, there are so many interest groups now in each party, and especially the Republican Party, that you don't know which way to turn. I mean, you have to be so multifaceted and make so sure that the wrong facet isn't caught by the wrong group that it's extremely difficult.
Now, you said that, did we talk enough about immigration? I feel like that we should have said something more about this. Did you say what you wanted to say? Because I thought that there is some kind of an issue. There's the race issue, the sort of racialism or prejudice kind of an idea. But there's also just the fact that people, a lot of ordinary people just think that the law is the law and the law should be followed. And there's a lawless situation. And they have the sense that there's this impending chaos or disorder, and that government should be about correcting that, not rewarding it.
I totally think that's right. I mean, I think there are real issues here. What interests me is the way that the real issues are getting driven by some sort of some very frightened passions. I think that we have every reason to close our borders, and terrorism is only one of the reasons, but Hezbollah has a stronghold in South America. They could be coming across our southern border. That's just one reason. And of course the people who've applied to come into this country legally should be the people who are angriest about illegal immigrants getting a break. You know, that is all right and true. But then there's something else driving it, particularly among the base on the right. And those two things fuse, and it gets very confusing because the arguments that are good arguments are being driven by this rocket fuel of sort of identity fears, I think, maybe.
Well, so now
There's more passion, that the passion that there is about that is beyond the reason, you know,
isn't that true with everything in politics? And I mean, these people who were working out a compromise and thought that they had sealed it all up, you know, I believe them, but it seems to me that they just completely got tone deaf about. They just didn't understand how ordinary people think, and they got blindsided, or they thought that if we say, look, we did something bipartisan, that then people would say, oh, great, since it's bipartisanism is like an automatic check on things. So if it's bipartisan, it's got to be good.
Well, Jim DeMint, I think it was. I was reading his website this morning, and I think he said he was getting like 95 to 98% of the calls he was getting from constituents were against the bill.
Right. That was such a failure. You know, they're always saying in Congress things like, oh, the American people want us to end the war. We know what the American people want. Well, this shows they don't know what the American people want. Yeah. They're always saying they know. This shows that they could blatantly not know.
And do they know on the subject of the war?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Sure.
I mean, this shows, maybe this shows something more systematic, that they claim to know. They claim to be channeling the feeling.
Well, of course, also the people who call their senator in a froth like that are the people who care the most. So they're sort of self-selected. They're not the people that a pollster is going to get by calling a random sample of 1,200 Americans. And I started wondering today what would happen if all the single-issue voters got offended and stayed home. You know, the people who only care about abortion, for example, if Giuliani...
So this should be a whole aspect of campaigning, is to figure out the kinds of things where you can not get people to vote for you, but just get them to not vote. Okay, we're back. Did you?
Yes.
Are we together
yes,
now?
We are.
We had the classic, the official. It's a trademark of blogging heads that there's always
something
some
goes
screw
wrong.
up.
Yeah.
So what were we talking about? Oh, that there's sometimes political. Sometimes candidates actually try to win by just convincing people not to vote, as opposed to
right. And I was saying that I was at a symposium in Minneapolis, and I heard Tony Blankley frankly say that was the strategy. That was a Republican strategy.
It should be a Democratic strategy, too, because there are all these really well-identified abortion-only voters.
Right. At this point,
just make them give up.
It could well be a Democratic strategy as well.
Yeah.
So it may be that they'll all just be picking off different sectors of the electorate
and the
turning them
Republicans
off
just
and
think
sending them home.
Yeah.
We'll have a very low turnout.
Republicans just want to keep certain ethnic groups from voting.
Uh-huh.
Right. That always looks bad.
Uh-huh. But they've got to be really careful about not turning off either the abortion voters or the immigration voters or both, because that would really be a disaster for them.
Well, I think there's a lot of desperation about trying to get Hispanic voters to like both parties.
Yeah.
And that's maybe that's what I guess that's part of the reason why the what's happening with my little technical. That's part of why the coalition was able to form, that Republicans were so afraid of losing the Hispanics that they went along with something.
And, of course, Bush has Hispanics in his family, and I've often wondered how much of his kind of moderation on immigration has to do with that. How much of it is political, a calculus to keep the Hispanic vote in his brother Jeb's camp if Jeb ever needs them, and how much of it is a family thing, really.
Well, I think he thought that because he has Hispanics in the family, that Hispanics would love him and that he could use that in a beneficial way. Or he would sometimes speak Spanish.
Well, of course, Cubans do love him because most of them are very conservative. But
so now, let me bring up the debates.
Okay.
You're not watching them.
I'm the kind of person who, if I don't see a series from the beginning, like The Wire, I can't stand to come in the middle. And I'm that way with the debate.
Eventually.
I wanted to see a debate. I thought it was going to be on Monday night, and it was on Sunday night instead. So I missed it, and so now I'm sort of sulking, like I'm coming in the middle of the series.
Who even noticed? First of all, you have to have cable.
Yeah, I do.
And then, but I mean, many people don't have cable.
Yeah.
And then, I sometimes, it's like the afternoon or just a few hours before the debate starts, and I'm like, oh, whoa, there's another debate today.
Yeah.
And then I watch it just because I happen to see it, because I'm always online looking at things. I don't know how ordinary people are supposed to see that.
Well, to tell you the truth, I follow the debates by reading you.
I simulblog.
And I thought your coverage, especially you're flagging a little bit, but I thought your coverage of the first Republican debates was really good.
Well, some of it depends on whether I go on pure simulblogging or whether I use the TiVo and pause it when I have something to write. And on the first one, if I have a lot of energy, I'll pause to write, and then I'll unpause. And then I can, just go on, and I'm sort of making a certain amount of transcript there. But if you really want to get through it and not be bogged down and keep it exciting, you don't try to get down the quotes. You just, snark here and there.
Just whack it out as it comes, which is how I do the Oscars.
Yeah, and then there's a kind of a standard way to do it in blogging that's not about actually trying to inform anybody of what's really being said, but to just make some wisecrack or to, paraphrase what they're saying in some ridiculous way, But I try to be a little more accurate in what they're saying and then criticize it and stuff like that. But to really do that well, you got to keep hitting the pause button, and you could spend 5 hours doing it.
You could easily spend 5 hours.
And you just really get sick of it. Yeah. But I was writing. Actually, my son John is in. He just graduated from law school, and he was IMing me from his bar review class. And he has various questions. So his question was, why do they keep the Democrats and the Republicans separate? Why don't they mix it up more? And this kind of raised the whole question for me of, the debates are pretty darn boring.
They are.
How could we tweak the format, change the format, to make people actually want to watch, not make such a big, well, I mean, there's sort of like the humor side of this question, which is, what would be some really crazy thing that everybody would want to watch? Mm-hmm. Like, let's elect a president according to an American Idol.
Make it like a game show or a reality show. Yeah.
Yeah, or let them do feats of strength or something
Make them sing. Make it like Miss America.
Or So You Think You Can Dance, and who would we pair up?
Make them come out in bathing suits and,
Well, what's the Dancing with the Stars? You ever watch that?
Oh, yeah.
So each of the, we could pair up each candidate with somebody who wasn't a candidate.
I like the way this is going. I want to have a president who can dance.
So then, we see who can do the best dancing or something like that, or maybe singing or something. But so part of this question is, it's like just a humor question.
Yeah.
Of what kind of funny things could we do with these characters. Mm-hmm. In my view, when I start thinking of them doing funny things, it doesn't seem funny. I think they're so relentlessly not funny. I mean, last time it was funny because we had Al Sharpton.
Yeah.
This time no one is funny.
Well, Rudy would be funny if he...
Rudy could be funny.
He could be, yeah. But he's being Mr., anti-terrorism right now, Mr. Big Stick. He's not...
Yeah, he could be kind of so... Andrew Sullivan called him a fascist or proto-fascist or something.
Yeah.
Like there's something... A lot of people who don't like him are trying to get this thing started that he's just, he's just a fascist. Or he's just
And then he's going to do away with our civil liberties, which he has talked that way, actually.
Yeah.
He's talked as if what Gonzalez has done is fine with him, so maybe that's not so great.
But we should... on torture, find the line between when does torture start?
Right.
All right. Well, we won't torture. We'll go right up to that line. Just tell me where the line is, and I'm going right up to the line. So that's
right.
That's sort of in the humor form, but it's scary enough that it's not actually that funny in these sort of traditional television entertainment. But I mean, on a
Fear
serious
Factor, they could do something like Fear Factor, in which they actually.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even want to go there.
Oh, somebody in the comments on my post, and I actually asked the question in a serious way, and I actually want to talk about whether there's a serious format change that could involve mixing it up in some way that would make it watchable and helpful. But in my comments where I was reporting John's question, somebody was saying, do it like Survivor, put them on an island.
Have them vote one off the island at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, but of course then they'd be picking themselves. I think American Idol would be a better format because, America votes.
That actually, we may wind up having our presidential elections that way.
It would engage people.
But
most people, they'd have to be like debating every week, and then you'd vote off somebody probably for a gaffe, and then you'd try to win by luring someone into making a gaffe. But I mean, that actually happens in the real debates. There's sort of an idea, did you blunder? And if you blunder, they can.
And how quickly did you regain your feet?
Yeah.
Sort of like when Obama said to Morgan Freeman that you were president before I was, and then he caught him. He caught himself and he corrected it by saying, "And you were God before I was too," which was I thought that was a good save actually.
Yeah, we'll have to dig out that old article and put it in the sidebar.
But I think anything that would get the debaters, the candidates, off of their canned presentation of positions.
Well, what do you think would happen if they combined the Democrats and the Republicans in one big
melee, in one big free-for-all?
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind. I think I'd be for it.
I mean, they'd have to agree to it. I mean, I think the biggest problem is that the only ones who would agree to it would be the ones that have no chance of winning.
Well, one thing that you want to know about each of these guys is how they're going to handle the opposition and how they're going to respond to challenges from the opposition.
Right. And normally they're just in this cocoon, and there's a certain range of ways in which they'll attack each other, but most of them are serious within their party, so they don't really want to ruin the ultimate candidate.
Yeah.
So it's all kind of a padded cell that they're in.
Right.
But if you mix them up, then they would do underhanded things, and the people who don't have a chance could be the hatchet man and stuff like that. And
it would sort of make their heads spin, maybe in a good way, because when they're coming at you from all sides, that really shows. It's like in martial arts, where that really shows your prowess. If you're being attacked from several sides, you really have to be nimble, and then you really see how these people can think on their feet.
Which is what they're going to have to do when they're president.
Exactly.
Yeah, so all of this canned...
anything that simulates the conditions of real life would be an improvement.
So maybe we could put them through some sort of make some kind of a test for them that they could go through. But then they wouldn't do it. They have to agree to do it.
Yeah. Right, and the front runners are going to be much too careful. You're right. You might be able to get people like Huckabee to do it. Who don't
Huckabee was kind of good. I'm sorry you didn't watch it because there's some detail to what they did. I was impressed by Huckabee. There was one point when he was asked about... Wolf Blitzer was the moderator, right? And I don't think he's really very good about it. At one point, he was kind of trying... At one point, he was kind of trying to make Huckabee look bad for believing in creationism. You know, which he does.
Does he? But does he really? I mean, I think that... I won't get off on this tangent, but I think that question was completely unnuanced.
Well, they all say that they believe God... They'll say they believe the theory of... most of them, but not Huckabee, will say the theory of evolution is... They agree with it.
Well, but Huckabee won't say it because it's the theory of evolution by completely random chance and natural selection.
They don't say that.
If you gave him a nuanced question, he might say that he believes in evolution guided by God.
I think they would all say, if they believe in evolution, they would also say, but God started the whole thing in motion.
Yeah.
God made evolution be the way of the world. And I'm sure Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, I think they would all say that. But Huckabee actually believes was asked directly if he believes the story in Genesis.
The biblical version, okay.
And he actually handled it well.
Yeah.
He said, and with some humor, he said, I don't know, I wasn't there.
That's a good answer.
Which is pretty good. And he also said, I don't know if it's 6 days in the sense of 6 days that we would have 6 days, or if it's,
6 eons.
If it's a literal story or not. But, he basically embraces the Bible, and then he doesn't ask those additional questions. So, he really gave a little insight into the way, people who believe the Scriptures, they're
reconcile it with science.
Yeah. Well, he actually made it seem pretty intelligent. And
I've been an admirer of his for a long time. I posted on him a couple of times, several months ago, being pleasantly surprised and impressed by him. And actually, I think he would be the candidate who could reconcile all the Republican factions, if only he weren't, from Hope, Arkansas, and and if only he could raise more money, because it's all about money.
Yeah. He could. He's kind of an appealing, like a nice-looking guy, but not in an impressive way.
He's a rock musician. He has a sense of humor. Yeah. He's pro-life, but he thinks that pro-life should continue after birth. And so in many ways, he reconciles. He really has a moderation to him. Yeah. That makes those positions of his quite sincere, but also not so extreme.
So I like that pro-life after birth stuff. It's a good way of embodying the kind of values, the traditional values stuff in a way that is appealing. Yeah. I was. What did you think? Well, you haven't seen it, so have you seen it? I was on the radio this morning, and they were interested in Tommy Thompson because he's our guy from Wisconsin, and I go on this week in review show every few weeks where they have someone from the left and someone from the right, and the person from the left is from the Green Party, and then I represent the right, even though I'm not really. I don't consider myself on the right, but
for Madison, you're a raving right.
I'm like
Madison,
a liberal, I'm a liberal hawk kind of a person, and so that becomes the right. And we always get into Iraq at some point, and people just go crazy. And what that woman is saying, it's a call-in show. But anyway, so they specifically asked me about Tommy Thompson, and I hope he wasn't listening because I said, he's just not camera ready.
Right.
Can't they just get the makeup right? I can't believe they go to all this effort to get a candidate ready to go, and then they put him out there looking weird.
He has sort of a howdy-doody look to him. I don't know.
He's a little funny looking.
Yeah.
He's funny looking.
Yeah.
You can't change that.
Yeah.
Well, you can change it a little, but don't screw up the makeup. And also, he yells. He just yells. It's weird. He'll be saying really good stuff, but it's like, but why is he yelling?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think he's hopelessly second tier, I'm afraid.
Yeah, but something gets you painted as hopelessly second tier.
And then nobody looks at you again.
But, the guy is a governor. Yeah. He actually who has better credentials than him?
Yeah.
He worked in the federal government, and he also was governor here for, 12 or 16 years or something.
And Health and Human Services is a good domestic credential. So,
right.
Yeah.
But right. He spoke well about health care. He got all excited about it. Oh, you hit my issue. But he just doesn't have the style quite right, and it's caused people to write him off.
Well, that goes back to the Nixon-Kennedy debates, and television becoming a huge force, and a rather irrational force sometimes in who we elect.
Yeah.
Huckabee actually, to me, very faintly resembles Richard Nixon. Speaking of Richard Nixon.
Yeah, he has a little of the jowly.
Yeah, there's something about him. It's fleeting, and it isn't. His eyes are certainly much different from Nixon's.
And he has I think he has a real warmth. There was something cold about Nixon that was a little scary.
Yeah, yeah. No, and James Pinkerton also has been very impressed by Huckabee. Mm-hmm. I think did you do a Blogging Heads with him once?
Yeah, a couple times.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, I made fun of him a while back because he was kind of, in the early days before the campaigns even really started at all, he was kind of promoting himself as he lost 100 pounds.
Uh-huh.
And he lost 100 pounds and it was kind of tied to his religion.
Uh-huh.
And I sort of felt like, weight loss.
Right.
It doesn't really qualify you for president. Why'd you get fat in the first place? That was kind of incompetent.
Don't knock it. People wanted Oprah to run for president. Weight loss is the #1 goal of baby boomers on this dreadful Eons website. The #1 goal. It was like, what are your dreams? What would you like most to accomplish? And these people over 50 wrote in and said, lose weight. That was #1.
Well, did you see that it was in the science report today that they have this pill now? Like, it's a little pill.
Another pill?
No, it's a little pill, and then, but it doesn't, it's not the chemical, it's a mechanical thing that it does. After it's in your stomach, and then you drink liquids.
It expands.
It expands. It actually looks like a breast implant. We always get back to the subject of breasts.
What happens if this thing can't get out of, does it just stay in your stomach forever then?
No,
or do you pass
probably
them through you and then have to take another one?
Yeah, you have to keep. Because it's a business, If it stayed there, then it would solve.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
We want
planned obsolescence.
It's a gelatinous blob. Fills up your stomach.
Oh, I saw the gelatinous blob on your blog, and I didn't have time to see what it was about.
You saw it on my gelatinous blog.
On your gelatinous blog.
So that might solve the problem. Ugh. And then you have this disgusting breast implant item in your stomach,
Ugh.
and then it just I think it dissolves eventually, and then you take another pill, and you've always got some horrible glob in your stomach. I don't know how that would work. Somebody said, well, what if you had to throw up? Would maybe some horrible damage would be done.
Oh.
A frightening thought.
I was just having images of people
speaking of breasts,
swilling ice cream around in their mouths and then spitting it out so they can have the pleasure.
That's a technique. That's one of the techniques.
Yeah.
Do you ever look at these pro-ana sites, these pro-anorexic websites?
I've read about them. I've never actually looked at them.
I've looked at them.
Yeah.
I was curious. There are people who their websites that are full of diet tips. Obviously that's there are all kinds.
And there's also pro-mia, which is pro-bulimia, right?
Right.
My niece, I have a niece who's an actress up in Canada who's been training up at Second City there, and she did a video, which actually is posted on YouTube somewhere, which was a parody of a talk show for anorexics and bulimics.
Oh, put that link up on the side. That sounds good.
It's very funny. It's full of diet tips and fashion shows for stick figures, and it's very funny.
Well, some people are very serious about that, and they find the pictures of the thinnest actresses, and they call it thinspiration, and they put the pictures up all over, and basically, the more kind of grotesque the bones are sticking. It's not like, oh, well, that's thin, but thin in a good way. It's like over the line where the stuff that really looks weird is what they particularly like.
Camp thin,
Yeah.
It's, I think it's another one of your religion substitutes, possibly.
Well, religious people used to...
mortify
saints
themselves,
and so on used to. So there's a tradition of trying to do something with yourself through self-denial. That shows in an extreme way that makes other people look at you with awe. How could you do that? You did that for beauty.
I've read that the French writer Simone Weil actually starved to death because she wouldn't eat.
Who did that?
Simone Weil, spelled W-E-I-L.
Oh, right. So she did it.
She actually died sort of malnutrition because she was so saintly and so self-abnegating that she didn't eat much.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
But there is something like that in human life. That there are people who. I did a post about the Dalai Lama. Did you see that?
Yes, I did. I thought that was.
Oh, right. You wrote some great comments.
I commented.
Oh, so
yes.
I mean, it's a whole thing of self-denial. Like you could say, never have sex, and then you are better than other people because you do that, or you don't eat, right? So there's a whole strand of human life that most people don't do.
Well,
the
there's
people
also
who do it are pretty superior.
There's a high. There's probably a neurological high to be obtained by depriving yourself also. I mean, it creates an altered state of consciousness, which is, perhaps more pleasant than the thing that you're denying yourself.
If you hold your breath, I think you can get high.
We used to do that in junior high school.
Make sure you don't get into a situation where you can't start breathing again.
Hyperventilate, have your friend throw your arms around your chest and squeeze, and you could black out in a very interesting way.
Yeah, there's a whole kid culture of ways to get high.
Yeah, well, spinning.
And kids discover it on their own all the time, like spinning and getting dizzy.
Yeah.
The whole urge to get high is a very
Well, Andy Weil wrote that whole book, The Natural Mind, which was all about that, about how people will alter their consciousness. You can't stop them. So, what's your favorite drug?
But
Mine is champagne.
I'm just naturally high, as they say.
Yeah, so is my
Well, I
husband.
like a glass of wine with dinner, but if I drink 2 glasses of wine, I just fall asleep. So now, I don't consider that being high, falling asleep.
That's being
I can't tolerate more than a glass of wine, or I actually will fall asleep.
Yeah.
And then you look pathetic.
I find that true too now. I used to have more capacity to drink.
Yeah, I just can't.
Changed.
But you said some interesting things in response to that post about the Dalai Lama. Just for viewers to understand, the Dalai Lama had said, let me dig out the quote.
He said that if you loved someone, if you were madly in love with someone, that they would change and lose their beauty, and then it would be disappointing and painful.
And I put it up because it's sort of like, he is talking like the kind of a person, like a really shallow guy, right?
Shallow
He
Dal.
said,
Shallow Dal.
Well, I missed that, what?
Shallow Dal.
He said, when you analyze the face or body, which is beautiful for 2 days, after 10 years, it's more difficult. It can eventually create unhappiness. That's nature.
Gee.
So it's sort of like he was saying, of course he's celibate. He has to be celibate. It's part of what is required of him.
The job description.
But so maybe he just rationalizes it because he's kind of stuck with it. It's not like one of us deciding, well, I'm going to have this. I'm going to make my life good by being celibate without having any religious structure to it. I mean, would you do it if it weren't part of something that was already imposed on you and then you were rationalizing it?
I love
but what
your
amazes me is that
said,
his rationalization sounds just like some frat boy or some ne'er-do-well.
Yeah.
That we would, because we're so supportive of marriage and sexual relationships that it just sounds bad, and yet we think because he's the Dalai Lama it must be
be noble and lofty and spiritual. Well, some of your commenters said, why isn't it also a spiritual discipline to stay in the marriage even as your wife changes, like the Shakespeare sonnet? Love's not love that alters when it alteration finds.
Right. If it's all about just being spiritually lofty, why don't you do that?
Well, I think one of my comments was that the Dalai Lama says a lot of things that if anyone else said them would seem very banal.
Exactly. I know.
Be happy, be peaceful, think good thoughts,
Were you the one that brought up being there?
Yeah, yes.
Say something about being there.
Yeah.
Well, it's like not everybody remembers being there, do they? Or can you just say being there and everyone
Probably not. It was Peter Sellers' movie, and it was based on a book by Jerzy Kosinski. And it was all about a guy who was really sort of a moron, I guess. And he said he was a very simple person. He said very simple things, and people found them profound, and he became kind of an oracle.
He became president.
Oh, he became president.
Oh,
See, I don't even remember
president.
that. I just remember.
Wait, this ties back to our theme of the debate. He becomes president. He says these incredibly simple things, and then people keep reacting to it the way you might react to some supposed religious guru.
Well, I know people who would say that about Ronald Reagan, but I guess that's not fair. He's a lot smarter than...
It does periodically come up, making fun of it, because you project onto the candidate, and you want to believe. And if the person never says anything that screws up your belief, then you can keep projecting.
Right.
And that was what it was with him, since he wasn't capable of saying anything at all complex.
Right.
He never interfered with their projection.
Right. And the things that he said were so general and so simple that they could be taken for profound.
Yeah, hopefully we don't fall for that permanently. But I think some of, I want to see Barack Obama move a little further towards saying something with more substance, because I think he's just gotten people enamored of him by just saying hope a lot.
And that won't last. I mean, that just does get
Yeah,
old
I think he
after a
knows
while.
that. I mean, I have no reason to think he is. I mean, he may well be the smartest of the group, based on some of the things he said.
Yeah,
he did have that good comeback about God.
He expresses himself so well. It's just a joy to listen to. I mean, if you're a,
you're
a word freak, if you love fine expression, you will sort of fall in love with him simply because he makes you feel smart. He's able to put a complex. He's able to express a complex idea without oversimplifying it, and yet make it very clear and understandable.
But some of that can be a scam. Some of that can be rhetoric where you use certain moves that make people feel that something intelligent has been said. They've done various experiments. There was one I blogged about recently where they hired, what was this one, where they got this actor to give a lecture, like as a teacher, that was complete double talk. It made absolutely no sense, but he, showed warmth and expressed himself in a certain way. And it was all form and no substance, and there was actually no substance in it, and then he got great evaluations.
And people thought he'd done a gorgeous job.
They thought he was just a wonderful teacher.
Yeah.
But it was an illusion.
Well, of course, there's so much gobbledygook in academia already that wouldn't stop people. I mean, if his delivery was warm and friendly, we just figure it was the same sort of crap they were hearing all
And there's
along.
a certain way of speaking where it makes people feel like, well, it's my problem if I don't understand. He's talking about science, he's talking about policy, and I kind of missed that. But I somehow feel confident that he seems to know what he's talking about, right? But I think there's a certain way you can manipulate people by just giving them a certain amount of feelings of trust, and I worry about a candidate that does that too much.
Yes,
so I do worry about him because he speaks in these sort of soothing abstractions about hope, and I just think there's something creepy about that.
If you don't get specific, you won't offend anybody, and it's really an artful dodge to be able to be non-specific and yet have people read their favorite positions into what you're saying.
Right.
I mean, obviously, I've done that with him a little bit in that, I claimed that he probably was not so anti-Iraq war as he has to say as a Democratic candidate. People jumped all over me for that and said, he means exactly what he's saying. What are you talking about?
Well, I worry that he's just kind of a peacenik, and that it was easy for him to be against the war because he would be against all sorts of things.
That was what I wasn't so sure about.
We talked about this last time, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about Fred Thompson.
Okay, that's the other thing about the
Obama.
candidates is their drawbacks, and specifically their marital drawbacks.
Yeah, that Fred Thompson has been getting a lot of attention because his wife is pretty.
She's such an asset that she may be a drawback.
And it's as if, suddenly he's just an ugly old gnome. But he's an actor. I thought he was supposed to be... What is it? Is he ugly or is he good-looking? What's the deal?
Oh, he's a character actor, so he doesn't have to be good-looking to be famous and successful.
But he's got the glamour. But even if he's ugly, because he's a movie star...
Because he's successful and because his face is well-known and he's got that sort of avuncular quality that people like. But now they suddenly see him as maybe the dirty uncle who,
Yeah, there's this one picture that's getting a lot of attention. Oh, and then there's this thing that, where was this? There was this thing that Joe Scarborough on MSNBC
really
said
mean.
about
That was
him.
really mean, I thought.
He said he was talking to Joe, somebody was talking to Morning Joe about Jerry Thompson, the wife of former Senator Fred Thompson, and he said, and we'll link to this. Have you seen Fred Thompson's wife? Oh yeah. You think she works the pole?
Isn't that disgusting?
You think she works the pole? I can't believe that was said.
I know. That's really disgusting. I mean, yeah, she's 24 years younger than him, and she looks like she's 24 years younger than she is, but she was not.
She's 40. I think she looks 40.
You think she looks 40? She looks
That's
40.
how 40 looks.
40 with, facelift and all that kind of thing.
I think that's how people look when they're 40 now.
If they've had work done, yeah. She looks younger than she is, but she was dressed perfectly modestly. She And he was looking at her in that photo with a light in his eyes, whether it's the light of lust or the light of appreciation and delight. It was
a lot
of
people were saying he was leering and that there was something horrible about seeing that awful old man looking at his wife as if he were sexually attracted to her.
Yeah.
How dare he?
How old is he, 64 or something?
I'm not sure.
Something like that. He's in his 60s.
But
that doesn't look so old anymore.
But whether it's allowed or not, I mean, it's easy to say, Scarborough was terrible, and isn't it good? It's great if a husband is attracted to his wife. Isn't that nice? She married him. She must be attracted to him. So who are you to say? But even if you can criticize people for coming out and saying, oh, look at that dirty old man with a younger wife, and he had been divorced for he'd married when he was like 17, and he'd been divorced for many years before he went with her. So he didn't dump
he and his wife got divorced only after their kids were grown up.
And he didn't dump her.
He actually got her pregnant and then married her when they were
when he was 17. So that's what happened in those days. But even if we can say, he shouldn't be criticized for this, and it's ridiculous to call it leering, there's still the subliminal effect it has on the voters' minds. I mean, some people are saying, are we ready for a president that has a wife that looks like that?
Yeah.
What do you think there?
It's very much a Hollywood kind of thing, and it's a new drawback for a Republican, I would say. The sort of standard Republican wife has immobile hair, a la Pat Nixon, and a cloth coat, and a sort of a pained expression. The Republicans have sort of been the party of decency and non-wild sexuality.
I think people have been insulting political wives like that for at least half a century.
Yeah.
So the idea that we still want that seems a little strange.
Right. Well, I really do think that Republicans are sort of supposed to be the fatherly, motherly parent party, and parents are not supposed to be sexual, right? Your parents aren't supposed to get it on.
And it sort of gives the image of, if he's our father figure, then it looks like he's having sex with his daughter.
Exactly. And she actually is younger than his daughter, so there's that. Yeah. And it may turn out to be his Achilles heel. I mean, it may.
I think it's like what I said with Thompson, Tommy Thompson.
Yeah.
Just get the stylist in. Just figure it out and do it right.
It's appearances. Well, but he can't change wives, obviously. I mean, his
she
wife
can
is
get a haircut.
His wife is appropriate for Hollywood, and his wife is appropriate for Wall Street. Everybody at that level in that world has a wife that looks like that.
But you just need to get the right
presidential
clothes.
Candidates.
Do you ever read about how Jackie Kennedy, of course, Jackie Kennedy had these great clothes, right?
Yes.
But I once went to an exhibit of her, like at the Smithsonian or somewhere. No, not this. They had like a fashion thing of all of her various costumes.
Yeah.
Oleg Cassini or somebody who did all of the
pillbox hat, pink suit splashed with blood.
But that was designed for her. That wasn't like the style that she always had. That was something that was developed for her in her role as a political wife, and she specifically wanted it to be like armor. I mean, if you look at it, even though it looks really modern, they're like sort of plates of thick fabric.
Yes.
It is kind of like armor, including the hat. So it looks young and sharp and modern.
A pillbox is a military thing, after all.
That's right.
Yes. I totally sympathize with her for wanting to have armor in that role.
Yeah.
I think it's a terrible, thankless role to be in. Really.
This ties to this feminist blogosphere subject that I wanted to bring up.
Yep.
The old crazy Clinton with the
yes, it sure does.
Feminist. It's the same kind of thing of how do you dress and how much should a woman kind of shield her body from the public view when she's in a political milieu. And I'm not saying that, you should be condemned for making a mistake or not quite getting it right. But there is a way to get it right. Like, obviously, Jackie Kennedy, monumentally, epically, got it right.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Beautifully right. That's the great model. How do you present yourself as a woman in the political sphere? What are you going to do? There are ways to do it and not get it right, like be over-armored, right?
Mm-hmm.
The helmet hair and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But there are ways to get it right, and there are things that don't quite work. And I think especially, when you're really attractive or you have a voluptuous figure, that you ought to, you need to think it through, and otherwise people will be subliminally affected.
Every time you say think it through, I kind of wince because one of your former trolls has come to rest on my blog, and she's calling herself Think It Through now. So. that phrase now means this person to me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Did she get that from me?
Oh, God, it's a good question. I have no idea. It's possible. That would be fairly characteristic of her, I think. To pick up have little bits of whoever she attacks stick to her like trophies. But anyway, never mind about that.
And you know, the whole subject of Clinton, the whole Clinton-Lewinsky thing,
yeah.
which, I mean, to me, to go back to this picture of Clinton with the bloggers at the luncheon,
yeah.
Was that I thought there was a subliminal effect of the woman in the picture reminding us of
yes.
Monica Lewinsky. This isn't like a logical, true thing.
Right.
This is like the subliminal effect. If you want to use Clinton to help his wife in the campaign, you want to use the good part of Clinton, not remind people of the bad side. So
but you were angry because feminists have given him a free pass on all of his lecherous behavior.
Well, yeah, that's
and, you know, I think the lecherous behavior can be taken too seriously. I mean, I don't know that it's violent. It's obnoxious.
Well, some of it
I think people
violent.
tend to be a little bit humorless about it, but I think it was highly inappropriate of him. And certainly feminists are extremely hypocritical in giving him a free pass.
Well, the problem that I have is that people were. It took a long time to get people to take sexual harassment in the workplace seriously. And a lot of people thought, well, isn't it fun to just have a sexy workplace where people can, make connections? And it was very hard to convince people that it's important to get a professional atmosphere in the workplace. And
that it was actually a way of putting women in their place.
And that it was wrong for someone in power to use his power to get sexual favors. And that it was also wrong for people to give sexual favors to get ahead. It wasn't fair to the other people who weren't giving them and so on. So it skewed the workplace in all kinds of ways that constituted discrimination. That was a really important feminist achievement. And what I have against Clinton, and I have against the feminists who gave him a pass, is that they threw all that away to give him a pass.
Because why? Because he was pro-choice?
Well, they felt like,
is that the trade-off?
Feminism merged with Democratic Party politics, and it was sort of practically analyzed. And, I mean, this reminds me of what we were saying about immigration before, that sort of like it's a complex problem, and you figure out the best solution, but then you sell out principle, and then a lot of people look on and feel like I'm one looking on and seeing, that's wrong.
Like,
the principle was more important.
Yeah. I think the feminists now are incredibly sophistical in their ability to turn on a dime ideologically when it suits them and smack the hand of anybody else who,
Yeah.
I mean, the way they'll just sort of turn around and change positions.
But there used to be, back in the 80s, there used to be interesting kind of critique and serious analysis of, how we should live and, what would be good for women. And there was there was criticism of marriage, something we were just talking about. But there were lots of different ideas going around. And then I think it kind of turned into this third wave stuff. I think Susan Faluti's book, Backlash, was really important. I thought it was a well-written book, and it was a book that impressed me at the time as being about, like, feminism could just be kind of these pretty basic policies that everybody could agree with, and that kind of go along with the Democratic Party, like pro-choice and equal pay. And it's sort of like, okay, so then that's what feminism is. But there was much more to feminism than that, and I really think that it kind of, just got onto a narrow band of a few policies that really shouldn't be that controversial, or not controversial with people who aren't social conservatives.
Well, the whole sex-positive thing really complicated matters, too.
Wait, I missed a...
The sex-positive angle just really confused matters.
Because around about, like, 1990... there was the anti-pornography movement.
Yeah.
And there was
Andrea Dworkin.
Andrea Dworkin and Catherine McKinnon. I got a lot out of that writing. I thought there was a lot of great stuff there, even though I don't go with the censorship stuff. I thought there was some really, there was a lot of ferment, there was a lot of interesting debate and discussion about feminism.
Yes.
And
it was serious. It was good reasoning.
But it was hostile to sex, and I think it did produce a reaction. But the reaction, well, what do you think of all of the pro-sex stuff?
I think it's, to me, women dressing like men's fantasies is not particularly empowering. I don't think women have even gotten down to their own sexuality yet, really. They're still bouncing off of the mirror. You know, it's because the style of dressing with short skirts, high heels, extremely uncomfortable and really not all that sensual for a woman. I mean, where are we coming from? We almost never got there.
Yeah, I saw an article in some British newspaper this week about how skinny jeans were going out of style. That there was like skinny jeans that people were wearing that were so tight they were actually compressing your legs. And it occurs to me, like, you know, that actually numbs your legs, if not actually doing nerve damage, making you lose touch with the feeling in your legs. And it's sort of like...
And high heels, which make your legs look longer and sexier, and they shorten the tendons in the back of your feet. And they can give you lifelong foot problems, the way ballerinas, who were supposed to have the same kind of leg line by getting up on point, the way they just destroy their legs.
So you would think that if something was supposed to be sexy, that it would feel good. That sex should have something to do with something feeling good.
Yeah, but it's sexy from a man's point of view. That's what bugs me about it.
And with bringing out your feeling, not with numbing you or certainly hurting you. Right. And that there's something amazing that all of these things that are supposed to be sexy don't feel good.
Breast implants destroy the sensation in the nipple.
Yeah.
You know, now why would anybody... It goes with our being a culture of what Christopher Lasch called a culture of narcissism, where what matters is how you're being looked at, and you have really no subjectivity doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, I have certain clothes that I like that actually just feel incredibly good.
Yeah.
They're very smooth or soft. And
I have nothing wrong with looking... I have no problem with wanting to look good, God knows.
Right.
But why look good on a model that was designed to turn men on, and specifically to turn men on in pornography?
Right.
I mean, I've always wondered about sexy underwear, for example. I don't find sexy underwear particularly sexy. Men find it sexy. Okay, so maybe the fact that it turns them on should turn me on. But being a woman, I'm not as visual. You know, I'm much more into the other senses. And so what happened to that? You know, it's sort of like it's all subordinated to the visual. Why? Because that's men's favorite sense.
You know,
what are ours, you know?
Right. And the idea that we need to get to the point where we can talk about it or think about it. Well, I mean, you can never separate these things, right? You can never really separate how you feel from how you make other people feel. Right?
Well,
especially
if you can never separate them, but you can certainly not lose how you feel completely in noticing how you're making the other person feel. I mean, there has to be some balance there.
I think the important thing is to be able to just talk about women and sex and these things. I think the biggest problem that I have with these sort of online feminists is that they're such stern disciplinarians ideologically. And
they're going around policing everybody else.
They're things that you have to believe, and then if you go off message or you respond to something they say critically and you want to talk about sex in some way other than the way they dictate is the right way.
But they also switch on you. They're also inconsistent.
Yeah, it does change. It's funny. There's some things... what are the biggest shifts that you remember?
Well, just the fact that Valenti, for example...
This is the main blogger in the Clinton and the Blogger photograph.
Right.
That I got in all this trouble for.
She's the one that you had the brouhaha with.
Yeah.
You go to her website, and on either side of the name of the website, Feministing, is a little figure of a woman sticking her sharp-pointed tits out.
The mud flap.
Right. It's like, you know, what Freudians used to call the phallic breast. You know, it's like giving somebody the nipple instead of giving them the finger.
Great.
You know, it's both. It's sexy and aggressive at the same time, but it's very much the kind of silhouette that, except for the fact that she has a finger in the air and is lecturing you, it could almost be something on a porn site.
I think she's supposedly giving you the finger. I don't think she's doing this sort of School of Athens...
shaking her finger.
Play-Doh gesture, right?
Yeah.
No, I think she's giving you the finger.
Well, she's also giving you the nipple, you know, and so to be so-called sex positive, but then not allow anybody to mention it, you know, she flies off the handle whenever anybody points out that there's a sexual element on her site or on her book jacket or...
Right. And so it's like it's using sex really openly for the purpose that you have, but then also forbidding people to talk about it in any other way. In other words, you made it the subject, but nobody's actually allowed to talk about it. It has to be accepted in the form that you presented it, and you use all the power of sex for your benefit. You've decided to use these silhouettes or this form here or to present yourself in a certain way, but no one else is allowed to talk about it. And that's the sort of stern disciplinarian stuff.
Well, Ryan at Politico said that she said Jessica is not shy about her body, and she got mad because the little logo on the site is not her body, and the woman's body on the jacket of her book is not her body. So how dare you say she's not shy about her body?
And then
you're supposed to be so careful,
Right. You have to say it exactly the right way.
And it's that thing of like, I can flaunt my body, but you can't look at me. If I think it was on your blog that somebody commented that some woman was walking down the street braless with really large breasts, and they were moving all around, and so of course he looked. And then she looked at him and said, I hope you got an eyeful, jerk. Well, it's sort of like, if you dress that way,
But that's a power move, isn't it?
You're demanding to be looked at.
But don't you think women do that? I mean, you present yourself in a way that has power over men, right?
Yeah.
But then
But then you deny it.
Right. I mean, that's part of the game. A lot of sexuality has to do with sending out kind of a sexual signal. Right, but then it's deniable. Right, you were doing it, but you weren't really doing it. I think a lot of what women do, I mean, that sort of like ties to this kind of old-fashioned idea of female guile and so on, or passive aggression, or lots of things that women do, maybe because they're not physically powerful, has to do with having an effect on the mind. This is back to the old subliminal stuff. And then, of course, if anyone says you were doing something, you weren't doing anything. Like if you make eye contact with someone, that can be very powerful sexually, right? Right. But you didn't do anything.
Yeah.
You didn't do anything.
Right. And you can even say that the other person imagined it.
Right.
And often do.
Right.
I mean, it's a good defense against rejection, obviously.
Right.
For one thing. I mean, you can always deny that you made the first move.
And it's important to get along. In this movie, Paris Je T'aime, which was 18 short films, there was one of the films was Joel and Ethan Coen, the directors of Fargo and all of those great movies, and Steve Buscemi was in it, and he was this American tourist in the Paris subway, and he's looking through his guidebooks, and he's sort of like the lonely tourist, and he's reading about, he stares at the Mona Lisa. Of course, the Mona Lisa stares back, so there's Mona Lisa's always making eye contact, right? This is an art thing of a portrait that's always looking at you. And then he turns the page, and he's reading about how to get along with the Parisians, and it says, don't make eye contact. And then he looks up and sees a woman across on the other side, and he makes just a little eye contact. And that sets off a whole set of events. It's sort of like, it's so dangerous to make eye contact. All of these things happen.
That's great.
The man who's with the woman goes crazy, and all of this stuff happens, so that the eye contact really counted. But of course, eye contact, it means nothing, right?
But it's a little different when you dress extremely provocatively and then you get angry at people for looking at you. I mean, that really is that's a whiplash power move.
But of course, to be fair, that was not true of the blogger in the photograph.
It was not, no.
She was not dressed provocatively.
No. I mean, you were just more angry at the feminists for giving Clinton the pass. That was much more about that, the way I read it, than it was about Jessica's breasts or anything.
And I had this debate with Bob Wright, and he was like, well, if you could dress much more provocatively, right? It's always, of course, you could always wear a lower coat. You could go naked. You could always dress more provocatively.
That was really a diversion from the main point.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? I mean...
Right. I mean, every time I get into one of these debates, there's always like a whole aspect of it that you...
And then it becomes, you're an older woman, you're jealous because she's young.
That was one of the things. And we talk about sexist things to say, right? It's sort of like when they decide it's legitimate to attack you, and they go ahead and attack you and say sexist things. We get to say sexist things.
Well, that's what I mean about them constantly switching direction.
Right. Yeah.
For example, your troll that I've got over there decided to attack me on what I was saying about Iraq, and she wound up saying maybe one of the reasons we don't have enough soldiers is because so many women of your generation had abortions. I mean, she didn't use the word, but that was basically what she was saying, and I'm like, what? In some other context, I'm sure this woman would be rabidly pro-choice, but it's sort of like constant changing of direction.
You know, another thing is like avoiding actual debate. Like in this Politico profile, they brought up the old feminist. I mean, I'll link to it on the side. But over at Politico, they did a profile of me, and one of their standard questions, which I didn't bring up, was, "What was your biggest dust up?"
Yes.
So I had to say that because that was the truth. So I wasn't like, "Oh, let's bring this up again."
Yeah.
I was really cornered, and since I agreed to do the profile, I had to answer the dust up question. It was the only answer to the question. Now I forgot what I was going to say. Because it's so stressful for me. But and that led, as you talked about, to poor Ryan Grimm, who was the Politico guy that did the profile, being attacked for saying Jessica's not shy with her body, which is like, oh, well, we know what that means. That means you called her a slut.
Yeah,
and you
right.
must apologize and retract it.
Yeah.
And he invited her to come on and do a profile or participate in this live chat that he did today.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't do it. I mean, I think part of it is, wanting to control the terms of the debate.
Definitely.
Actually having a lot of incoherencies there.
Definitely.
And then not wanting to engage, not wanting to talk with people who have the other side because, in fact,
you'd get out-debated.
You might not have
get
any
out-debated.
answers.
Yes.
There's a fear of debate.
Yeah.
I want more debate.
It does make you miss the days of serious knockdown, drag-out fighting over these issues.
Yeah, if you go back to the old Kennedy-Nixon debates, they're incredibly substantive.
Uh-huh. Well, people had longer attention spans then. They were still better educated. I mean, fewer of them were educated, but those who were better educated.
Yeah, yeah.
And it just shows you what's the celebritization and soundbiteization of everything. Yeah. Now it's all about how they look. I mean, even then it began to be about how they look, but they were still saying something.
Yeah, do you remember the book The Selling of the President?
Yes.
In 1968?
Yes.
Joe McGinnis
Yes.
wrote a great book that was about, if you look at it now, I actually still have the old paperback. It's like Nixon on a package of cigarettes.
Yes.
And it's sort of like, imagine selling the candidate like a product.
Yeah.
And it was like this amazing thing. It was as if that was really critical. Oh, that terrible Nixon, he was sold as if he were a product.
Yeah.
He was presented and now, of course, it's so completely the norm.
Yeah.
But that was like as if it was a strange new idea, and how dare anyone, only a really slimy person like Nixon would do such a thing.
This is what television has done to us.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're really far gone.
Somebody wrote recently that the average American still watches 4.5 hours of television a day, and that's a huge percentage of their discretionary time, and that is really one of the most destructive forces in our...
But I think people are watching less TV. They're hanging out on the Internet
Well,
more.
we are, but, that doesn't mean that everybody is. I mean, certainly I'm watching less TV than I ever did.
Yeah.
Partly because shows like The Sopranos ruined the rest of television for me.
Oh, no, we only have one more episode.
I know. And I'm scared, too.
So,
I'm just like my heart pounds when I think of it.
Do you think Tony's going to die? That's the...
I have no idea. The thing that I love about the show and that also makes my heart pound is that I really have no bloody idea what's going to happen, which is like life,
Right.
Life is always going to blindside you, and David Chase has managed to do a pretty good imitation of life in that respect. I never know. I'm almost always surprised by what happens on that show. I have no idea what's going to happen. I mean, if he were to frustrate everybody's expectations, Tony would go into witness protection.
What would be satisfying to have happen? The last episode, if you don't know. The last episode
would be satisfying? I can't imagine that anything that could happen would be satisfying. I don't think it's supposed to be satisfying.
I think something terrible has to happen to Meadow.
Oh, dear. Really?
She's...
Really?
I mean, that's
something terrible, like she's going to become the next, she and her boyfriend Patrick Parisi are going to become the new heads of the family or something.
It's too much like the way The Godfather ends. Anything?
Well, to tell you the truth, it's as useless to speculate on what's going to happen as it is to speculate about what's going to happen in life. It's the reason I like this presidential campaign, too. I usually say I don't like the perpetual campaign, but I really like this campaign because I have no idea what's going to happen, and I love that. I love surprise. I love suspense.
Sometimes but we shouldn't get suckered into wanting things to happen just for our excitement. I mean, it might be better if it was really boring and stable.
Oh, I don't want things to happen just for my excitement, but I'm not beneath being excited when they start happening.
I mean, sometimes I think, well, who do I actually want to win, and who would actually be the most fun to blog?
Uh-huh.
So I think, I hate the idea of Bill Clinton back in the White House. I just can't tolerate the idea that Bill Clinton gets back in the White House. And yet I feel like that's some good blogging.
Sort of like what's good for the country is bad for the blog.
Well, you know, there's always a way to deal with whatever happens. Oh, if that's the way it's going to be, then that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah. Well, who else do you think would be fun to blog?
I kind of like Barack Obama.
Uh-huh.
You know, his wife is pretty sharp. She's sort of Jackie Kennedy-esque. Have you seen her?
She's very classy, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
She
and
seems
she's very modern,
genuine.
you know. She's sort of free speaking. She's not too controlled. I like that about her.
Yeah.
She might
seems
say something.
confident and poised and natural. All those things.
Yeah, she looks great. She has a kind of a Jackie Kennedy look that I like.
She's cute. Yeah, she has sort of
a
cute button-nosed look.
Or sort of like Mary Tyler Moore. She seems very, I don't know, she has like a crisp, modern look that I like a lot.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I don't think we should vote based on the spouse, other than the one thing that I just can't stand to think of Bill Clinton going back in the White House.
Uh-huh.
Or do you think that would be good?
No, I think it would be, I don't think either one of them would be any good, and I think their terrible marriage, which I really think is terrible.
Aren't you impressed that they stayed together?
I think that would hamper her as president, you know. I think that those difficulties, I think that, you know, marital instability in a time of national instability is just one more factor that you don't need your candidate to be having. I really would like to see a tight team in the White House in terms of the president
There's some kind of team, though.
And spouse.
They formed a permanent bond there over whatever it is, power.
Yeah, but it's a real love-hate thing, I think. You know, I think she was in love with him.
Yeah.
And I think that he really has hurt her many times, and that she has a lot of psychological scar tissue.
Yeah, well, it's the old story, you know. If he's sexy enough, he can do all kinds of bad things and then suck you back into it.
But that's interesting, because that comes back to my sort of feeling about, you know, how the Democrats tend to choose young, sexy men candidates. Mm-hmm. And the Republicans tend to choose older, authoritative, fatherly candidates.
So the Democratic urge is for a boyfriend?
Yeah, or more for a boy, for a lad, you know.
But you know, Bush is kind of boyish.
Ugh, yeah, that's true. Maybe that's why it didn't work, you know.
Yeah, well,
they had a son, a brother, a bubba instead of a father.
He's been smacked around a lot, precisely because he seems callow.
He and Clinton were both born the same year as me, and I'll tell you, they are not making our generation look good. Neither one of them.
I think
not yet grown up, you know, prolonged that adolescence so long, and it's still, now it won't quit.
Now, speaking of boomers, this is my segue to our last topic, which is, people are going to get sick of the boomers. People are sick of the boomers. The boomers are dominating all the way through. It's pretty annoying.
Now we're dominating politically. We've dominated culturally for all those years. Now we're old enough. We're not, you know, politics is Hollywood for ugly people. But now we're old enough to be dominating politically. We never go away.
Yeah, but it was the 40th anniversary of the release of Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah.
So everyone was talking about the Beatles.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about the Beatles?
And I had a dream that my sister and I were trying to make a sort of test tube baby in a Tupperware container, and I opened it up and it was full of dead Beatles. So I guess that goes to show that I was really not, you know, terribly happy to be. I was not a big Beatles fan. I was fond of them. You couldn't help being fond of them. Your life was saturated with their music, but it didn't get me on a deep level.
I actually hated them at first just because they were too popular. Everyone made such a big deal about them, and I had another band that I loved.
Who was that?
I didn't like them being overtaken.
Who were they?
The Four Seasons.
Really?
I loved the Four Seasons.
Wow.
I remember when I was very young, I thought, if I can't marry Frankie Valli, life is not worthwhile.
Well, I'll go you one better. I was into Frankie Avalon when I was about 12.
We need a Frankie. I just had a big
an
crush
Italian
on
Frankie.
They
were
sort of the mini
Italian
Frankies. And my mother loved Frank Sinatra. My father looked like Frank Sinatra.
Well, it was a generational thing. You know, Frankie Avalon looked like a sort of a second-rate Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
He's still around.
Yeah.
But he sang this song, Venus, you know, when I was 12. Since I'm older than you, my sisters and my younger sisters are your age, and they were listening to the Beatles, you know, when it was all I Want to Hold Your Hand and all that sort of kid stuff.
Yeah, I held off on really liking them until maybe like Beatles 6, which they don't call it that anymore. They use the British titles now. People don't remember Beatles 6, Beatles 65, all of that. But by the time it got to Sgt. Pepper, I was definitely on the Beatles side.
Well, I probably liked Rubber Soul and Revolver as much as anything.
Yeah, Rubber Soul and Revolver were great.
Yeah. But then when they got into the druggy stuff,
I bought into that.
You did?
I mean, they advertised drugs, and I remember when articles came out saying, "Oh, it's terrible. This rock and roll is convincing. It's advertising drugs."
Yeah.
And we laughed at that, but the fact is, it was.
Yes.
The whole generation was sold on drugs.
Yeah.
Where do we get them?
And but I thought their drug music was just awful. I mean, I think Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is a piece of musical morality, you know. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. It's like it's about as successful to me as the Star Wars theme, which has a beginning and nothing else. It's just the beginning all over and over again, you know.
I think it's very evocative. And the thing is, we were talking about what's your favorite Beatles song, or what are your 5 favorite Beatles songs, or something like that. But
yeah.
I realize, you know, although I do have one favorite Beatles song, which I'll say in a minute,
okay.
I like the albums. I like the way the whole album fits together, and it reminds me of a particular time, and you listen to it straight through. It's not like today where you buy a song, what's your favorite song?
Right.
I mean, there were singles, like in the early 60s.
Yeah.
It was all the fun of the singles, and I like a lot of the pop singles. But with the Beatles, it was the whole album and the whole feeling that you had when you listened to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I can't really break out the individual songs.
It was, an album was a whole era, a whole time period in your life.
Yeah.
That's, the record that I have that feeling about is Bob Dylan's New Morning.
Oh, that was my college album.
I just loved that album, and it was very meaningful to me. Yeah.
If dogs run free,
then
why not we across the, what is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was good. I listened to that a lot. New Morning. So what is your favorite Beatles song?
Well, I looked at a catalog to remind myself of some of the ones I'd forgotten, and I have to say that She Said was probably certainly one of my top 5.
When I heard that song, it made me feel like, and a lot of Bob Dylan songs made me feel like this too, that these rock singers kind of knew more about life, and they had a very strong message about who the good people were and who the bad people were, and they were in fact particularly critical of women, sort of empty-headed or insufficiently deep women. And that the standard women were going to be held to, not the beauty standard, but something on a much more, psychological level was going to be really high.
Yeah. You know? I'm Looking Through You is another song
I'm Looking
that
Through
I love.
There were a lot of songs
again,
like that.
has a... But
and the Bob Dylan one that did it the most was Positively 4th Street.
Uh-huh.
You know,
and I lived
got
on
a lot
4th
of nerve
Street,
to say you are my friend. You know that song?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's my home.
Yeah, my walk to law school from my apartment was all along 4th Street.
Yes.
So I used to think about that song. And I used to think how weird it was that I felt that Bob Dylan was accusing me of not being a good enough person when I was a teenager. Which I did.
Well, She Said, I read that, my reading of that was a song about what it's like to be involved with someone who's depressed. And it was such a great evocation of someone, of just trying to break through to someone who's depressed, She said, I know what it's like to be dead. I know what it is to be sad. And, he's like, yes, I do understand. When I was a boy, everything was right,
But he also says that she's making me feel like,
I've never been born. But she says that to him first.
Yeah.
And eventually she gets him down. But first she says, and you're making me feel like I've never been born.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought that was that song did so much with so little. It was so minimal in its materials, and it just made a whole world out of that. That was a song that meant a lot to me.
I also associate that with Tomorrow Never Knows. Turn Off Your Mind. But that was a big drug song.
That was a big drug song, and
Turn Off Your Mind.
Hardly a drug song of theirs
that downstream. That was also a big tune in, turn on, drop out.
That was a Timothy Leary sounding
I
kind of
totally
thing.
bought that line.
The only drug song of theirs that I sort of have any use for is A Day in the Life, because it was more than just a drug song.
Right. Yeah. The little How to Smoke part is kind of inserted in the middle. That's the Paul McCartney stuff, and the John Lennon stuff around it is much more kind of a protest song, sort of a social commentary stuff.
I do like the song Come Together.
Come Together is great.
I love that song. I love the lyrics. They're sly. They're,
He's saying "shoot me," in the background.
So what's your favorite?
Speaking of subliminal things, don't you think maybe he implanted the idea shoot me. He was saying it over and over, and people listen to albums over and over, and it's only barely audible. It's subliminally planting the idea in people's minds.
Like inviting martyrdom?
Well, he got shot.
Yeah, he did.
So my favorite one is, and it has been for a long time, speaking of getting shot, happiness is a warm gun.
Uh-huh.
I like that one. I don't even know what he's talking about.
Uh-huh. Well, that's that.
Like a lizard on a window pane.
Yeah.
She's well acquainted with the touch of the velvet hand, like a lizard on a window pane.
Uh-huh. I have to say that drugs did something for their post-drug lyrics.
Yeah.
You know.
The requirement of making sense was not as big as it had been.
I mean, it's sort of the way I appreciate drugs, you know, the way it's sort of mixed up your mental contents and made you a little more...
flexible.
Unpredictable.
Open-minded.
Yeah, yeah. So, but are the Beatles great? Will they outlive the baby boom generation? Well, what do you think?
Well, you know, my kids are in their 20s, and they both. I have two sons in their 20s, and they both like the Beatles.
Yeah.
And in fact, my older son has, read all these books about them and knows a lot more about them than I do in great detail. A lot of it is on the musical level.
from any younger people who listen to this, what they think about the Beatles.
And friends of mine, I've seen a lot of kids that age who are very interested in the Beatles. I could see not liking the Beatles just because they're so associated with the boomers.
Yeah.
And just because you get sick of hearing that people say, oh, they were better than anything else, and you didn't have the equivalent, we had better. Yeah. That's not a good way to get kids interested in the Beatles. The way to get them interested in the Beatles is, just play the music around the house, play it in the car, just let them hear it, and let them come to like it in the natural way. Don't tell them this is great. You're supposed to think this is better than
that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, like my father was always saying, oh, the big bands, they were better than rock and roll, and that just earned contempt.
Sent you to the other extreme.
Yeah, I thought he was a fool. Old man.
Actually, I don't know about the big bands, but the standards, the great songs of their generation are really immortal, man. They're so witty, the lyrics are so delightful, and the melodies are so they were right about that. I'll hand them that.
They were. Yeah. I thought they were lame, but they were the greatest generation.
Yeah, I think, the tradition of thinking your parents are lame is just a necessary part of recreating
But it's actually
the world.
less common today. I think there's some studies showing that a lot of kids today really feel like their parents are their best friends, and they have very good relationships with them.
Just now, when their parents really are lame, kids are getting along fine with them. Maybe that's why.
Well, maybe lame is likable.
Well, they're certainly seeing their parents as human and vulnerable in a way that we didn't. My sister's kids have held their hands all through their divorces. It's almost like.
Hey, I've been drawing through this. I've been just doodling.
Have you been doodling?
I've been doodling.
Oh, well, maybe you'll post the doodles if they're good
I'm just
ones.
putting it up on camera.
I have posted doodles a little bit. Can you hold it up? Put it.
Yeah, I'm holding it up. Don't you see it? Can you look? Can you see it?
Oh yeah, psychedelic, man.
Okay, should we wind to a close? What do you think?
Well, we've been at this for, again, longer than an hour, I think.
I know. And then we have that earlier part, so we have to put it together. We've lost track of time once again with our drug-addled minds.
Yes, I know. Just no sense of time.
Okay, so should we say goodbye?
Okay.
Okay.
To be continued.
Okay.